Hello world, hello internet, hello people with a possibly unhealthy interest in the executive in two diagrams. As usual, you've come to the right place. So let's talk about the executive in two diagrams. Now, I think I've kind of covered this elsewhere in other presentations, but I think it would help tremendously if we just go back to this and try to make sure that we're clear and happy with what we're talking about when we're talking about the executive. It is particularly confusing in the UK because we do not have a clear and effective separation of powers. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We've got something called a fused executive, and it's worth spending some time to explain exactly what that means. It means that the executive is fused with the legislature, so we need to start by looking at the legislature. And of course, in the UK, we have a bicameral legislature. We've got the Lords on this side, and of course on the other side in green we've got the Commons. And you should know the difference between these by now, and certainly this is not the time to go into it. But anyway, this is our legislature, bicameral, composed of these two chambers. Now, our legislature is fused. This is part of the rules of parliamentary government. You'll remember that all ministers of government, all government ministers, must be drawn from Parliament. So how does that work? Well, it's very, very simple. The government sits essentially between, on top of the two chambers. Everybody who is in government, certainly everyone who's in the political executive, needs to be drawn from Parliament. But of course, not everybody gets to be part of that game because we've had an election, and after an election, one party is going to be in the majority in the House of Commons, and they're going to be invited to form a government. So if you're on the wrong side of history, if you're on the wrong side of this particular debate, then you're going to be consigned to the opposition. You are out of the government game. You are consigned there to being in opposition and crossing your legs and hoping that in the next election things might change. You are not going to be part of government. So who is part of government then? Obviously some MPs and some Lords. If you're not part of that game, if you are not part of government, then you will be sitting on the back benches. You're still part of the party of government, so there's lots of Conservatives in this particular administration who are sitting on the back benches, but they are not part of government. But note that we have got some Lords here, and we also have some, why don't I put them in red just to be on the safe side? We have got some Lords there, and we've got some members from the House of Commons. So members from both the Commons and the House of Lords are invited to assume roles within the government, within the executive. And this really is that notion of the fused executive, and indeed a key aspect of parliamentary government. So our ministers are drawn from both the House of Lords and indeed from the House of Commons. And I'm now repeating myself, so it's probably time to move on to the next slide. So now we need to talk about the permanent and the political executive, and to a certain extent this is kind of beyond the scope of the course, but it helps you tremendously if you understand it. So we're going back to this idea. We've got our ministers. We've got, I think it's capped at the minute at 97 of them, and they will be drawn from the Lords and the Commons. And these are, or rather this is the political executive, but they can't do it all by themselves. I mean, quite apart from anything else, if you've just won an election, you're a politician, I mean, what on earth do you know about agriculture? How many farmers do you think there are in the Conservative Party? How many, well, in the Conservative Party, lots, but in terms of Conservative MPs, how many Conservative MPs are there from the agriculture sector, and how many Conservative MPs are teachers, even fewer. So these MPs, they are professional politicians. What do they actually know about how education works, or about how the agricultural sector works, or about how the environment works? The short answer is nothing. These guys are professional politicians. Essentially, they're qualified to do nothing other than stand there, smile, kiss babies and win elections. They don't know necessarily how to run a country. And the good news is that they don't have to, because when they come into an existing system of administration, an existing system of governance that we call the civil service. And these guys are there. They were there for the last administration. They're there for this administration, and they'll be there for future administrations, and hence they are known as the permanent executive, whereas our politicians here, we call them the political executive. Essentially, they're here today, quite possibly gone tomorrow. They're not permanent. They don't know anything about governance, and that's not the point. The point is that they are there to make decisions and then explain those and justify those decisions to the people. If we look, for example, at Ian Duncan Smith. Ian Duncan Smith is currently Minister in charge of Work and Pensions. In that capacity, he's in charge of pensions and he's in charge of unemployment benefit. He's never been unemployed and he's not a pensioner. What on earth does he know about work and pensions? He's never really had he was in the army. I don't know if that qualifies as a proper job. But he is now there making big decisions about people's pensions, about unemployment benefit. As far as I know, he's never really been unemployed. He can't be an expert in all of those. He's relying instead on the advice that he gets from his civil servants. And that's really, really important. Michael Fallon, he's in charge of defense. What does he know? I don't think he was ever a professional soldier. He's relying upon the Ministry of Defense to help him make the right decisions. And then he goes back and he accounts for those decisions in front of the rest of the people. I hope that helps clarify a few things. That's about it. I'm going to stop there. This is one of my shorter presentations. If you've got any questions, you know where to find me. I look forward to answering them, and I'll speak to you soon.